You're listening to the Race and Racer podcast presented by Race 92. This is our 100th episode, and we're actually starting the exact same way that we started our first ever episode, which I thought was fittingly right. I think all of us did, and we were joined by Mr. Jagger Jones driving in the Indy NXT Series this year for Cape Motorsports. Jagger, it's always
guys. I'm excited. It seems like just yesterday we were talking for the first episode, and now it's cool to see you guys had a lot of great guests in between me, and it's cool to be back for the 100th episode.
Absolutely. And when we first had Jagger on, Scott, he didn't have a whole lot going on, right? So I mean, he'd been in the K&N series, and
it was destitute motorsports wise.
Yes, and it's been kind of cool seeing your career kind of come back up and kind of grow. We're kind of with the podcast, right? I mean, we kind of both kind of started off at the same time, really. It wasn't that much after we started the podcast that Jagger got the USF deal.
Yeah, it's cool to, in a good way, to have new beginnings. And I mean, I'm just super excited, like you said, racing in the Indy NXT by Firestone Series this year. And I mean, less than 2 years ago, it's actually been from the first time I drove an open wheel car. Pretty much exactly a year later was the first test I got in the Indy NXT car. So it's kind of surreal. I feel like a lot of people can't really say that their open wheel journey progressed that quickly to where I'm at now, but obviously had a lot of racing experience in the past. But it's kind of surreal. And like you were saying, I didn't have much going on back at that time, end of kind of middle of 2021. And now we're beginning 2023 and coming off a good year in the USF 2000 series. And I think we're going to have another good year this year. I got a really good team behind me with Cape Motorsports, and just seems like a lot of stuff's falling our way. The whole team, including myself and Dominic, Nicholas, Reggie, everyone's putting a lot of work. All the my mechanic, Jeremy, everyone is putting a lot of work into this series, a lot of effort. More than I even expected. And I think that's really going to pay off when we get to St. Pete in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think back. We talk and, your eyes were still completely set on NASCAR at the time, or at least pretty much set on NASCAR at the time. At some point, you decide to go just watch a USF race out on the East Coast, and then all of a sudden, I get a text one day that says, "Hey, I'm going to be in town for a seat fitting."
I remember that.
I'm like, where? And he goes, Cape Motorsports. I'm like, who is Cape Motorsports? Which I should have known. I didn't know. And he's like, for my USF team. I'm just like, what? And Jagger, he's one of those people. He tells you on the kind of a backwards way. He's going to tell you something. But and it's just been really great. Not only to see you progress, but as you've obviously hosted a few times on the show. We've interviewed you a few times, and it's been really cool to see you just grow as a driver, and as you're getting more mature as a person, and it's really cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I didn't even realize that. I probably didn't tell you. Sometimes, like, you have the feeling like it's something so like popular in like your head and your world, and it's all you're thinking about. And sometimes you just assume other people know like what's going on in your story, and then you catch yourself like, oh, I haven't even told anyone really. But yeah, kind of going back to that time, kind of explaining kind of this little bit of a story of what happened. I was really set on the NASCAR stuff. I really enjoyed the NASCAR stuff, and the challenge of it all was cool. And but I just don't think the timing was right. Like, I had some success, but maybe not as much as I wanted. And kind of when the COVID situation happened, money was hard to find, and the stuff we had going kind of didn't come together as I expected it to. And I mean, that whole time was just really chaotic for everyone, especially in the motorsports industry. And I went off to college, sat on the sidelines for about 2 years, and I was kind of thinking like, I don't want to give this up now. I mean, I've grown up since my earliest memories, telling myself I'm going to be a professional race car driver. And I didn't want to give that out, but I knew kind of the longer you wait, the longer you don't get in the seat, the small every day, the chances of you kind of getting back to where on track just kind of diminish over time. Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of rethought everything and kind of thought where I could create an opportunity for myself. And I'd done some open or road course stuff with the karting, and I'd seen a lot of the kids I've raced with in the past when I was younger kind of go that route and have success. And I mean, I thought might as well. I mean, if this is the time to kind of make that switch and really kind of try to create an opportunity in that world, it would be right now. And had some advice from some family friends and some people encouraging me that it would be something that I would be good at. And I sat down with a few people, talked to kind of everything over, and it seemed like everything kind of fell into place like a lot quicker than I expected. One person who's really big in helping me with that was one of the first persons I talked to was Mike Pohl, and he was able to give me a lot of good advice, and eventually stemmed to me continuing to work with him to this day. He's been a huge help on that journey. I don't think I would be right where I am now without him. So he's one that really comes to mind to thank with that. And I've really enjoyed like the open wheel stuff. It wasn't just something that like it kind of seems like a little bit like, oh, the NASCAR didn't work out, so might as well try this. I've always had huge passion with IndyCar specifically and open wheel racing in general and road course racing. So I think honestly too, it does fit my driving style a little bit better, kind of aligns with kind of my mentality, maybe aligns a little bit more with the IndyCar stuff than it did with the NASCAR stuff. So I'm really excited, and I think a lot of things do happen for a reason. So yeah, I mean, the goal now is to kind of go Indy 500, IndyCar, and I'm pretty well headed that way.
Now, would you say after doing the NASCAR stuff and going into more the IndyCar route that, I don't know, maybe you kind of feel more at home now just because of your family name and, you know, the history that your family has in the sport? And I mean, you know, obviously NASCAR, I mean, IndyCar, obviously there's a lot more history with your family. So I would think that you would kind of feel more at home, right? Like just the culture around it.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think I didn't realize that. I didn't really even think about that before. But I think as time goes on, I think the IndyCar paddock's a lot more of like a close family, where the NASCAR is kind of very separated by teams and a lot of manufacturers, and it seems a lot more of just a big business, and a lot of people don't talk or get along. But the IndyCar paddock is super connected, and I think it's been that way since my grandpa's days, and it's kind of a lot of the same family names and people you see. And I think everyone kind of intertwines a little bit more than they do in the NASCAR world. So I've definitely noticed that. And I think that's definitely helped me a lot. I think a lot of people have kind of thrown their hand and willing to help me a lot more in this world, in the IndyCar world, than the NASCAR world. And I mean, it's awesome, really, honestly. It's super cool to see that. And like I said, like I didn't really expect that at all. But it was cool to see that happen.
Yeah, I like I said, I think I told you privately one time. You know, it is nice to be able to, you know, truly be able to walk up to Roger, Chip, whoever, and you've already kind of got a relationship already without even really meeting them. You already kind of have a common ground. Or Mario. I know after your first podium at St. Pete last year, you went over and got a photo taken with Mario, and it just I think it just I feel like just having been around a little bit and seeing it, it just seems like it is a better fit for you. But like I've said before, like with your brother Jace, you know, I feel like with his racing style, that I feel like the stock cars are were and are a perfect fit for him, because that is more his personality.
Yeah, I think considering now his activities since he's kind of gotten out of the seat have been bull riding, motocross, MMA, wrestling. I think that kind of explains why he was more fit for the NASCAR style.
Yeah.
And I think he was kind of all elbows out always since we were kids. Like I remember every single race we'd come back to, everyone knew in the karting days, every single race, like I would come off the race, like no matter where I finished, my car would be pretty much clean. The front bumper, especially, wouldn't have too many marks. And then I would look back in the scale line or look up even sometimes when we were racing against each other. And I saw every side pod, every front bumper, every single thing either hanging off or dented or tire marks everywhere. And I think he would have, I think that kind of explains his driving style. And he wasn't scared to push people around. And I think that's what he had the most fun doing. So,
Well, Robin, we went and watched you guys run Newcastle, and in his class was Montoya's son, and Robin said they're going to crash each other. I'm telling you right now, they're going to crash each other before the race even started. And it was, 5 laps in, both of them were sitting in the infield.
Yeah, and then Lucky probably could have thrown some money on the dads fighting after the race too, one more time.
Right.
Hey, Bowie, take on Montoya.
That didn't happen though. That I was proud of that deal. That didn't even come close to being an occurrence.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. That's if you ever go to a go-kart race, like the race is fun to watch, but you could be just as entertained watching all the dads standing along the fence.
Right. Sure. Yeah. They got a lot of what you'd call passion for it. So I mean, you moved through your journey. You ran USF 2000, which I think a lot of people who knew your background were a little surprised that you started off in that series. They were surprised that you didn't go with something a little more like Indy Pro, something with a little more horsepower. But you were talking about that a little bit last year, and and kind of explain why you decided to start at the USF level versus going in the Indy Pro.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of like usually like if you come from karting, a lot of kids do the F4, then USF 2000 and Indy Pro, or go the other F3, F4 route or something, or the juniors now. And it's kind of more of a clear cut path of when you do things. But when you start over here and you're going over here, it's like, where do those things really line up? And I had a lot of conversations about that, of kind of what was the right fitting series. And I mean, for me at the time, like the F4 stuff or the juniors now didn't really seem fitting. I think I was a little beyond that, just with my age and kind of the experience I had in the past with the other racing. And then that kind of fell out of the window. And then if you look at the USF 2000 and Indy Pro, it's pretty similar cars. Obviously, the power and downforce is a little bit more significant in the Indy Pro. But honestly, like the budget still wasn't then and still isn't like unlimited by any means. So kind of you pay what you get. And it seemed like the value, at least for me at the time, in the USF 2000 series, to go out and learn for a year made a lot more sense than do it in Indy Pro, where it costs more, and the amount more you're learning might not have been very much different. So it wasn't necessarily worth it, is what it seemed. And I don't know. I think it was a good series. I think those cars, you do learn a lot with a low downforce and low horsepower car. You really learn the basics, and with the car being that light, and you really feel everything you do, and you have to be really particular with all your footwork and all your hand movements and every little thing. So I think I did learn a lot from starting in that series, and I think that's kind of I don't know. We were like, just to kind of skip forward a little bit, like after this year, the team felt I was prepared enough to go into the Indy next. And I think that kind of just explains why we did choose the USF 2000, because it does prepare you pretty well. And there's been people in the past kind of jump to the Indy next from USF 2000 or other series and do all right without doing Indy Pro. But I think everyone's situation is different. And mine was pretty significantly different than most. So I hope that somewhat answers the question, but
no, it
it's
does.
kind of just learning, really.
Well, and I'll tell you too, and we didn't know it at the time but you actually had a really strong group of drivers to race against too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not taking anything away from Indy Pro. To be fair to that group, I don't know too many people who run it besides Jack Wayne Miller. So I'm just looking at your series or last year. You had Miles who full out aggressive all the time. You had his Jace Denmark, his teammate who aggressive, but he was raced a little. He had a different style. And then you had your teammate, D. Orlando, who ended up winning the championship. But you had those three guys and yourself, and that was pretty much the top four in points. And for the most of part of the season, that was roughly your top four. But it was a good group of cars, and I think the competition level, you guys were able to push each other a little bit, which I think was good as well.
Yeah, I know for sure. I signed with Cape before. Michael had already had 2 full years with Capes and in the USF 2000 series, and he had some races even before that. So he had a lot of experience. But when I signed, they didn't think, and I didn't think that he was running with them again. But it ended up turning out he was. And at first I was like, oh, like a little bit more competition. And it's always tough to race against people who have a lot of experience at the tracks you're going to go to, in the cars you're going to go to. So I think that was kind of like a little concern for me. But after like the first couple test sessions with us, I was like really happy he was my teammate, just because he had most of it figured out to a certain extent. And I think my learning curve, having him as a teammate, having all the data and video from him, and kind of just someone to push me a little bit, was super helpful in my development, especially at the beginning part of the year. So I was actually super happy that ended up happening. And I mean, he's a good driver and always seemed to help me out. It's like we never had that relationship where we were trying to hide data or hide things. So it was cool to be able to learn from someone that had the experience. And if I wasn't going to win the championship, I was happy he did. And then, like you said, Jace Denmark, someone I grew up racing with from Arizona as well. It was kind of full circle to be racing against him again. And Miles, I had raced against a little bit in the past and some karting stuff, I believe. And he was very aggressive. So it was a good mix, like you said. And I think, yeah, like we definitely all pushed each other. And really, I think we all developed as drivers because of that. I
think you got to have that. The old saying, iron sharpens iron, all those kind of things. But I mean, the bottom line is you got to be pushed, because, sometimes you think you know where your limits are, and somebody can push you beyond your limits, and you find out, oh no, that wasn't my limit, that type of thing.
Oh, of course. Like, especially on like some of the private testing we would do, I'd be like, all right, like that feels fast. Like, I don't know if I go much quicker. And then they tell me over the radio, like, oh, Michael went whatever lap time, but it would be like 2 or 3 tenths quicker. And I'd be like, all right, well, I'm breaking a car length deeper everywhere, and let's hope it worked out. And a lot of times it would, a lot of times it wouldn't. But a lot of times you wouldn't have pushed yourself or even known that limit was there without a teammate. And I'm sure he had pretty similar experiences sometimes. So especially when you're in the same equipment too, it's possible. The Capes are super good about, we're definitely changing the car to driver's needs, but all the cars are just super equal, and they give very fair attention to everyone. So, if your teammate's doing it, then it's possible.
Right. Yeah. It was amazing to really watch how they operated last year. All the work. I mean, they put in so much work on those cars, between races, and I thought they were fair about it. Like who had the faster car, that's who they, worked on first. And they had like their thing. It's like, hey guys, this is how it is. And, and they'd make the changes and yeah, I mean, Nicholas, man, just a workhorse. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, I think it's going to be as interesting this year when they don't have quite as many cars to take care of, how much better that program can be.
Yeah, I think they did a very good job of operating 4 cars, which is not an easy task. And I think they did very good with that. But like you said, I think having the attention, I mean, these cars with the Indy NXT cars are definitely more complicated. There's more data, more things that you're thinking about, possibilities to change when it comes to dampers and shocks and more aero stuff. So I think now then just being able to focus on our two cars will definitely make a difference. And I mean, we've got some new, very similar team as before, but we've added a few people like Neil Albarico. I'll give a shout out to him. He's kind of doing the coaching for me and my teammate this year, and he has a couple years in these Indy NXT cars and at a lot of the tracks that we're still going to. So someone like that's going to be huge in my development this year, and just another set of eyes always really helps, especially in the driving department, because a lot of times like you'll be doing everything becomes kind of like subconscious after a while, and you don't think about some things, and sometimes just having that extra set of eyes and going over the video and data makes a big difference. So it's cool to see the team's commitment and trying to get convincing him to come and help us this year, and then just all the work they do. They're just really seem to be, I don't want to go too much in detail of, kind of all the stuff they're doing, but it just seems like they're going above and beyond. And I think some of the other teams maybe might be getting kind of complacent, and they have some other IndyCar programs and other race teams to focus on. And these guys are putting 100% of their lives and their effort into these two cars. And I really think that's going to make a big difference. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I chose to make this jump with the Capes, because they put their heart and soul into their race program, and that is their main focus in life. And you can see that. I saw that day one when I walked in their shop, and that's really kind of why I chose to race with them last year. And my opinion on that was only proven more and more throughout the season last year. And those are real racers that you want to be with. And even in a new series, I think if anyone can kind of jump in and figure it out quickly, it's them.
Right. Yeah. And I think when you said they're real racers, they are racers to the core, absolute racers to the core.
So after, obviously you've done the road to Indy for a year. Before that, you were in the NASCAR K&N Series. How would you say the competition level really compares? Because obviously both are cutthroat, right? NASCAR, you're trying to get into the NASCAR Cup, and then, trying to get into IndyCar. Like, how does that really compare?
So the first big difference that, I kind of knew before, but you really realize it once you kind of get in both of these development series of the NASCAR and then the IndyCar. I think the NASCAR stuff, the equipment varies a little bit more with them not having a spec of cars. Like in the K&N series, like there was me and my teammate and the McAnally cars, whether there's 3 or 4 of them, were solid cars. And then it seemed to drop off pretty significantly after that. And I think you even see that in the truck series. The truck series is pretty competitive, but there's definitely a lot of filler cars towards the end of the field that aren't really showing up with the hopes to win. They're kind of just, on smaller budgets, and it shows. You got to do what you got to do, but there's definitely a wider variety of what are the teams are putting into the series and the outcomes they get. And I think you see that even in the Xfinity series, really only like 10 cars are really capable of winning. Only a couple you think are going to win the championship. But in the open wheel, these development series, every team in USF 2000, every team in Indy Pro, pretty much every team in Indy NXT is there to win. And I really like that aspect of it. I think that really drives the competition up a lot. And with it being more of a spec chassis, and yeah, there's a lot of things we can change, but this team doesn't have a completely better chassis and car than what we have over here. It's just a lot of small details and figuring out how to set up the car. I really like that. I think it comes down a lot more to the drivers, a lot more of the team's engineering, and it doesn't just come out to all out who has the best budget, who has the best costs. And I think that part of it's really cool. And I've kind of respected that in this IndyCar paddock, and that kind of mindset even follows all the way into IndyCar. Really, pretty much every team can win if the circumstances are right, and there's a good percentage of the field that is really there to win the race. And I don't think you see that as much in the NASCAR stuff, but it's still obviously very, very competitive. But I would say that's the first big difference. I think you race a lot less in the open wheel and this type of stuff than you do in the NASCAR stuff. I remember even in the K&N series, I think we ran 14 or 15 races, which wasn't a ton, but like once you start moving up to the truck series, you run like 20 or 25, and Xfinity's somewhere around 30. And I think that helps with development. I think it does kind of hurt definitely with the cost of it all. And that's what does drive kind of the budgets up a lot for those teams. But I think in the road to Indy stuff, or all the kind of USF and F4, even Indy NXTs, and even IndyCar, really, you don't really get to race as much, which becomes tricky on a driver, especially one like myself who doesn't have a lot of years of experience to fall back on. So that's kind of, you got to really take every single thing you can learn every race weekend, because you don't have as many times you are on the track. I think the testing is a little bit more though, so that does help, but I think that's a pretty significant difference. And that's why you see like a lot of guys in the Indy NXT Series that do have the budget to do it, go and do a lot of the sports car stuff, whether it's IMSA or over in Europe or Dubai, all over the place. So I think that's definitely a tricky aspect, but when you're racing against guys who do already have 3 races on their 3-4 races under their belt this year, and I'm kind of showing up to St. Pete, I haven't raced since last September, so that's a long off season. So but you can't really make excuses for yourself, so you just got to take what you have and make the most of it.
And that's why you have sponsors like Total Sim.
Yeah.
Yes.
That I would imagine that becomes a very big part of it though, right? Getting high quality sim work in, that sort of thing.
Yeah, with SimCraft, they've been helping me a lot with, I'm actually going down to Sebring this weekend and doing some simulator stuff, since they have a lot of stuff set up there at the Trans Am race. And I got a call today from them, like, yeah, we went to sign you up for a credential, and they didn't name me the name, but like the girl knew who you are, and they have Richard Petty being the grand marshal and doing the command for the race on Saturday, but they don't have anyone on Sunday. Will you do it? I was like, sure. I mean, I don't know if I can back up Richard Petty, but I'll try my best, and it'll be the first time experience of doing that, a little earlier than I expected in my career, but I'm all for it, and it'll be a fun experience, but also good to be down there getting some laps on the sim. It's been about a month since I've been in the car, so no one's been able to test for about a month, kind of with the new Firestone tire situation. But they're doing a great job kind of working with the teams and getting tires available, but no one's been able to test the last month. So it'll be good to go get some simulator work there this weekend and be ready for our test Monday at Homestead. And then we're right off to St. Pete for the first race of the year. We load in on Thursday there, and then practice for Friday, practice Saturday, qualifying Saturday, and then race Sunday morning before IndyCar. So it seemed like, I don't know, it seems like it was just like November, like a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, we have 3 months to get ready for this. And we've definitely been putting the work in to be ready, but it's like, it seems like it's going to forever away, and the next thing you know, it's pretty much next week. So
yeah, I remember when Everham, I mean, obviously I didn't see him in person, but I remember when they were showing on TV when Everham did the Dodge deal, they put one of those countdown clocks in their shop, and it was constantly running, and I think that's, I always think that's an interesting concept, because you think you have so much time, but then you watch that clock run down, and then all of a sudden one day you look up and you're like, oh boy, there isn't much time left.
It seems like it just overnight, it feels like that, but I think I know we're ready, and I know we've done everything we could. Obviously didn't get a ton of seat time, just kind of an interesting time getting in the series where the tire was switching, but I got 2 days at Sebring and then 4 days at Homestead, and then I get another day at Homestead. So not a ton of seat time, but I think as you do move up these ranks, you have to be ready to go. without all that testing and seat time that you sometimes get at the lower ranks. So, I mean, I think we made the most. I know we made the most of the test days we've had, getting every single last lap out of the tires, and just learning about the car. Me learning about my driving, and I think sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah, you can only work with what you got, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say the biggest change for you is going from a USF car to an Indy NXT car?
I think it's a pretty basic answer, but it's the truth. It's the horsepower. I think not necessarily the speed you're going down the straightaway or like the speeds necessarily, but it's more applying that horsepower and the way the horsepower affects how you have to drive every part of the corner. Just because these cars, they have a lot more horsepower and not that much more tire. So when you do want to go to power, you better be as straight as possible and your hands straight, and be able to kind of a lot more throttle modulation and setting yourself up to get the straight exit so you can carry that speed through the exit and onto the straights. So I think just kind of that aspect of how you have to drive it to position yourself to be able to use the power has been the biggest difference for me. I think the downforce is definitely something that's different. The wind, I remember when we were testing at Sebring, the wind was kind of changing each and every day, and just how significant the difference of brake zones were when you do have that huge rear wing compared to a USF car and all the extra downforce. In the USF, it might change just a little bit, but it's like 5 to 10 miles an hour difference sometimes with the wind, just which way the wind's blowing. And I think that makes a big difference. And that's something I have to think about a lot more now than I did before. And then just, I think having a heavier, bigger car is a difference. The races are going to be a lot longer, a lot more about saving tires. All the USF races were pretty much just an all-out sprint. Never thought about saving. You had plenty of tire for the race. And you'd see us kind of go fast even towards the end of the races. And it's not going to be like that. And then Indy NXT, the tires go away. I think the Firestones will last a little bit better, but I mean, still, when you have that much horsepower and that much weight, the tires do go away a lot quicker. So it's going to be a little bit more about saving, but a lot of similar stuff, just at a bigger level, and kind of everything a little bit more exaggerated than it was before.
What will be the fastest track that you guys run? Would it be like Iowa? Would that be the fastest?
I think Gateway probably. Maybe
okay.
like not maybe corner speed, but maybe 3 and 4 of Gateway is pretty fast. I don't know if that's quicker than Iowa or not, but I think the top speeds will be quickest at Gateway. We don't go to any big 1.5 miles or Indy anymore, so the speeds have definitely gotten cut down from not going to those tracks. But I mean, even tracks like Road America going into turn 5, it's pretty fast. So I don't necessarily know the top speeds of that, but
yeah, I think it's too bad they don't run. And you may feel different about it, but I think it's too bad they don't run the oval anymore.
And yeah, it is. It sucks. Obviously, you want to try to have maybe a little bit of experience before you do go there in an Indy car. But I mean, I guess no one.
Your family has experience, so that counts as something.
Yeah, it does. I don't know if that's going to help though.
Yeah, I don't know if osmosis goes through the bloodline like that.
Sure it does. Sure it does. I know you have something to say about this, Barry. I bring up racing the oval of the Indy NXT car, so I'm sure you got something to say about that.
No, not really. I mean, I would like to see it, but I get both sides of it. I do. I will tell you, I thought Chris Wyndham's crash there a few years ago was a lot worse looking than it should have been. And I would imagine that got some people's attention. So I get both sides of it. I do. I mean, yeah. My thing of it, people always say, well, tracks are too fast. And I always say, well, the object isn't to crash, but sometimes you can't avoid it either. I understand that. So, Sad part is that the Indy Lights race, Indy Next, whatever you want to call it, man, those were good races. They always had there.
Oh, super good. I mean, I think that the speeds were lowered a little bit. It kind of did turn it more into a pack race. And I think that probably drew some attention and drew some heads when you have those like 4 wide finishes and everything.
Right.
You don't really see that. And yeah, they're going a lot quicker in IndyCar, but speed isn't necessarily what makes the track so dangerous. And I think that maybe had some play in it. I think there's some aspect of, kind of wanting to keep the 500 the only thing on the oval. Now that NASCAR doesn't run there at all, I think that probably had some effect to it, maybe. Sure. But it is tough because I think that was a big draw for the series, drive like talent wise and kind of the eyes it had from IndyCar and from kind of what you could present to a potential sponsor, to your sponsors, but you can kind of return to them because Carb Day, Friday, it's one of the biggest days of IndyCar of the year. Bigger than I would say bigger than a lot of the races. So that was kind of, I think, tough to lose for the series. But I mean, if it's not safe, then it's probably not worth it. I mean, I think too, like in the IndyCar having the aero screen now and us only using the halo maybe have some effect to it, but I don't know all necessarily those technical details or what they did to determine that it wasn't safe, or I don't even think they've given an official reasoning of that's why we don't go there to some big tracks, but I'd assume that has a big play in it. And you do see like a lot of young kids, like 17, 16. I think the youngest kid in Indy Next is 16 or 17. And I mean, those kids are tough to beat all minute. And there's some good kids at that age. And, but I think that does turn some of the older guys' heads. Like, should a 16-year-old be running at Indy at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny. I remember watching like the old Super V series running places like Michigan or even like the Atlantics used to run like Michigan and stuff like that. And they had some pretty spectacular crashes there. So, I mean, I get it.
Well, it's funny, the point Jagger just brought up about, younger people and Super V. And a good example of that would be Pete Hosmer, who was, I think, like 40 racing against, and his big rival was Allinger Jr., who I think was in like his 20s.
Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. Right. One thing I will say, kind of changing subject a little bit, but I thought the NASCAR and all the oval experience I had with the NASCAR stuff would help me out a lot more than I've only had one open wheel race on an oval, but it didn't seem to help me too much. So I was kind of a little bummed about that. I think that is one area where I do need to focus and work on. I mean, I don't have a big sample size, just the one race where we were okay, but wasn't as kind of right off the bat ready to go as I thought I would be. It's completely different. And I think after like having that experience myself and then watch Jimmy Johnson try to go do that, or someone like Kurt Busch or Kyle Larson's going to do it. And then next year, it's like, it's not as similar as people make it seem to be. I think it's very, very different. I think the only thing similar is the only thing you can really look back on is driving in a circle. Everything else is completely different.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this: Raceway Park's a lot different than Iowa, which is a lot different than.
Of course, yeah.
Which is a lot different than Gateway, because Gateway, I feel Gateway and Iowa race more like a traditional racetrack, where Raceway Park in these type of cars, you got to put them right on the fence. There isn't any outbreaking somebody, diving underneath, that type of thing. So it's a little different, but you're right. I mean, I don't see how. I mean, the stock cars are so heavy. You're lifting at the flag stand.
Yeah,
these things barely rolling the throttle. Getting in, at least at Raceway Park. And you sure don't want to roll out enough to where it upsets the chassis, and you don't really want to touch the brakes. And and all those types of things. Right?
Yeah. Another thing is since I was under 18 when I did do all the NASCAR stuff. I never got to race on any of the big tracks at all. So I think some of that stuff where you're off the throttle a lot less, sometimes just lifting, not even braking at all, and sometimes not even getting fully out of the gas on those 1.5 miles, probably would have played to a little bit more benefit to this type of open wheel racing where it's similar, where a lot more throttle time, a lot less brake, a lot less off throttle time. But most of the NASCAR stuff I did was the short track stuff, which I think is complete far opposite of the IndyCar oval stuff. So I think I was kind of not, but I was definitely like, wow, this is completely different than what I expected. That's for sure. And I think when we go to Gateway and Iowa this year, which are two tracks I have raced at least I'll have some sort of sense of direction there. But it's definitely going to be a new learning experience. But I'm looking forward to it. I've always liked oval racing, and even Raceway Park last year was fun, even though I mean, I think we were pretty fast, honestly, there. I just made some mistakes in qualifying, and there wasn't very much opportunity to pass. I was pretty much stuck behind the same kid the whole race. So that might have had some effect to it too.
Yeah. The interesting thing, I don't know about Iowa, but like last year, Gateway, the next cars were able to roll the outside. Once it got a little deep into the race, they could roll the outside and make some passes. It'd be interesting to see if you can do that with the Firestones. You're hopefully there's not so much degradation that there's a lot of marbles and stuff out there.
Yeah, I think it seems like such like a knife edge in the IndyCar on the ovals. Like I think it's kind of just open wheel racing in general. It's like it's either there or it isn't. In the NASCAR, you have a little bit more feel of the right rear, and you can really kind of feel everything that's going to happen. And the stuff that does happen doesn't happen so quick. But when you're getting in an IndyCar and you see it, it seems like it goes from hero to zero real fast.
Oh, absolutely. So it's funny you were talking about Jimmy Johnson, and I remember we were joking last year about how it was almost like you were kind of following his career path, right? Because when he was in NASCAR, you were going the NASCAR route, and then it's pretty much almost at the same time, right? When he started going IndyCar racing, you switched to the road to Indy. So now, I mean, I don't think you're going to be going back to NASCAR, but now he's kind of going back to NASCAR.
Yeah, I mean, I got some off weekends though. If anyone's got a truck or Xfinity car or anything, I mean, that's one thing about me is like, and I think a lot of drivers are the same way. Is like, I would be happy to race pretty much any car. Obviously, the focus right now is on the Indy NXT, but off weekends definitely looked at some sports car stuff recently and kind of looked into some opportunities there. And I mean, I'm a racer at heart, and I'd like to race more than just what we have planned for this year with the Indy NXT stuff. But it gets tough with the budgets and what's possible. And but who knows? Maybe this year I'll be in some other stuff as well.
Yeah,
that is one thing that's different about NXT than it was USF. USF had more races.
Yeah, it was less weekends, but we do like double or triple headers pretty much every single weekend. Where the next stuff is more
one race, right?
Excuse me, yeah, mostly one race. I think we do double headers at
I think Speedway.
Yeah,
Speedway,
like Detroit.
Speedway, Detroit, and Laguna Seca. So there'll be a couple, but just less races, but more weekends, more tracks.
Right.
What about the physical demands of it? I mean, so last year USF, like you said, a little less downforce. Indy NXT, a little more downforce. You've tested a little bit. Do you notice a difference with the weight on the front tires and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely more physical. I think the longer races come into play. I Sebring the first time in the car, I felt okay, but I was, a little tired by the end of the days, but nothing too crazy. It wasn't too big of a jump of what I expected. And then I had a pretty productive off season, did a lot of training. I mean, I always am very consistent with that stuff, but maybe focused on a few stuff, kind of knew what it was going to feel like more going into the 4-day test we had at Homestead. And I was ready to go. I mean, I didn't notice any sort of fatigue more, any difference from the USF, which I felt really comfortable in. And I think it's obviously a lot smoother track. But I think, I'm pretty ready to go. I don't think that's one thing that I've really ever struggled with. I spend a lot of time in the gym and working out, and I have a strong neck. I mean, so far, like everyone complains about, like, I'm going to knock on wood here, but everyone's like, oh, then your neck. And for me, like throughout my racing career, maybe karting a little bit, but since then, I've never once ever had my neck get tired by any means. So who knows? But I don't want to say anything until I'm running around. Maybe when I go to Texas or Indianapolis, or even maybe like Gateway or Iowa this year, I might say so. I might have a different opinion on that. But to this point, I've been pretty ready to go. I spend pretty significant amount of time making sure I am. And that's one thing, like as a driver, like you can't go out and practice every day. So everything you can do, you better make sure you're doing it well. And
Sure.
I think fitness is one, video, and kind of just looking over as much video and data and stuff as possible are two things that I also think I do just about as much as I can of. So
two things. So first off, I heard someone, it was like Trey or Jackson last week when I was at Fast Times, was talking something about does like the USF cars have power steering, or vice versa? Does one of the cars have power steering, the other car doesn't, or something?
No, I don't think anything.
No, none of them. Okay.
Mm-mm.
And the second thing, I totally forget what I was going to say. Go ahead, Scott. I'll think about it. I'll have it here.
No, it's just yeah. I don't think any of them have power steering anymore, or even a power assist in the rack. But
I know I was going to say. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I mean, obviously, Indy NXT car accelerates faster. I mean, and goes faster. I mean, the G forces. I would say that there's more G forces. I mean, obviously, the more G forces. I learned that after doing the 2-seater with Mario. Just the amount of G forces you feel in the corner, right? So the faster you go, I would think, the faster you accelerate.
Yeah, obviously, there is a lot more G forces. I think a lot of that's to the added downforce you have in the Indy NXT. And G forces definitely make a big effect, but I mean, it's very comparable. I mean, a race car is a race car, especially the corner speeds with how light and stuff the USF 2000s were. I mean, the corner speeds were pretty fast. And I mean, obviously they're quicker in the Indy NXT, but I don't know. You do it a couple laps and a couple sessions, and it just feels typical. I mean, we're race car drivers, and we're used to speed, and at least myself, I mean, you adapt to that stuff very quickly. It's more about kind of the techniques of driving, and it's more about kind of what suits each car, because it's very differently. Like the stuff that you need to make an Indy NXT car go fast compared to a USF 2000 car, and the kind of the feel you're looking for, and the driving styles, the braking techniques are all a little bit different. So I think it's more focused on that, and I think focusing on that kind of takes your mind off the differences in the G forces and the physical aspects, and then you do a day or two and you're kind of used to it, and it just feels no different or no crazier than it did before.
Well, I will tell you, I experienced about 3 Gs in Mission Space at Disney World, and I never want to experience that again. So you can have the G forces.
Do you guys use the in your in-ears Do you have the accelerometer deal that measures the G forces and the impacts?
Yeah,
And that?
in the ears. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got scanned for them, and I haven't been given them yet, but we are, I think, required to use them this year.
Yeah, you didn't have to use them last year, I don't think.
No,
right?
we did not.
Right.
So I think we got to talk a little bit about the Daytona 500 this week, because normally, so this is going to be our 100th episode. So we usually talk a little bit about racing. So I'm guessing you probably watched the Daytona 500, right, Jagger?
I did. I didn't watch every single lap, but I watched the last 50 and mixed part of the beginning. So I mean, it's the Daytona 500. I mean, the last 50 laps is when things really get interesting. So I feel like I saw most of the race.
Yeah.
I mean, he picked Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Yeah, I was
win
about
it.
to say that. You did pick him.
He picked him about 3 minutes after the race was over. But he did pick him to win it.
The text was delayed. I promise.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, a couple of big stories from Daytona 500. Obviously, your buddy Jimmy Johnson, did pretty good. He got caught up in one of those wrecks. I don't think it was a very last one. It was like second. It was near the end, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Connor Daly. Sorry, go ahead.
I saw Jimmy was in the one, and it looked like whoever was on the top spun down, clipped him pretty hard, and I was like, oh, that's it for him. And then I saw him run up there again, and then he gets to the next one. So I think that's just how Daytona goes.
And Connor Daly, stayed out of trouble there for a while, and I mean, it's just a crazy deal, right? How they did the dual races, and literally his first time in a Cup car, first time on Daytona, well, at least on the oval. He may have done Rolex 24 before, but you know what I mean. I mean, was in the dual race, so and that's just got to be an extremely sketchy situation. But I mean, he did halfway. I mean, I think he finished the race, right?
Yeah, he finished, I think,
Yeah.
a couple laps down. They had been having tons and tons of technical issues with that car.
The car was bouncing.
Schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, without the testing and all that. I mean, if you come out of the box with problems, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest, I wouldn't say surprises, but one of the biggest stories was really Travis Pastrana and how well he did. He ended up finishing 11th, I believe. And he'd never been in a Cup car, but obviously he had nationwide experience. At Daytona, he'd race at Daytona too, but he was quick. But the 23XI racing team was pretty quick.
Yeah, it was cool. It's always cool to see guys like Jimmy and even like kind of out of nowhere, Travis Pastrana signing up for the Daytona 500. And it's cool to see even Connor Daly as well. That was kind of out of the blue. And that team did seem like they struggled. I don't really know like the personnel or too much about that team and kind of the program they have, but it seemed like they definitely did have a lot of those bugs with the car that you expect from a new team with seemed like didn't really have very much help from anyone. But one thing I saw thought was pretty crazy was it's kind of getting popular is like Kyle Busch. Like he keeps bringing up like, oh, if it was 1998, we would have won. And I'm just like, but it wasn't. And the rules were different now. And I mean, yeah, it sucks to lead lap 200, but it's crazy to see how quickly things change at Daytona, and especially the 500 when you pretty much you either win or you lose.
Well, I look at it this way: I'll let them do that as long as the Speedway finishes, as long as the Indianapolis Motor Speedway finishes at 200 laps every time. They can have overtime and extra time or whatever you want to call it. I mean, the sport's more built for that. You hear the people who say that type of stuff for Indy cars, and it's two totally different types of racing. And Indy cars, the race needs to be over when it needs to be over.
Yeah, I agree, and I think NASCAR's done a really good job of making the cars safe enough to be able to do that. And everyone knows, the drivers, the teams, the officials, 32 cars are going to come away not looking good, and 8 of them might be all right, and there's one winner that might be pretty banged up too. But I think they've always kind of banked more on the entertainment aspect of the sport. And not saying that it's fake racing or anything like that. Obviously, it's real racing and super competitive. But when you throw in those super speedways like that, it's like sometimes it's just like throwing the lottery almost, which is crazy. But it's cool to see things switch up, and guys like Ricky Stenhouse, who might not be able to go win the Coca-Cola 600, but he has a shot going to Daytona to win the Daytona 500.
Yeah, and Ricky, it's kind of funny. Open wheel guy, he really gets his big break in open wheel racing. Tracy Hines gets hurt riding his motorcycle, hurts his leg, hip, knee, whatever. Tony Stewart needs a driver to replace him, and Ricky Stenhouse comes out that year and wins everything under the sun. And from there, he just kind of gets picked up, and his career kind of takes off. And he's a guy who, people, at different times in his career, he's crashed a lot, and people question whether he should be there or not. And he finally proved to him, hey, I can get the job done.
Yeah, he is a really good super speedway racer. And if you guys ever have him on the show, I have a question, like where, like you said, coming from open wheel racing and his background, and like how do you even learn to be good at that? Like his statistics, winning a couple of times at Daytona and Talladega, and now winning the 500. It seems like he's always up front at these races towards the end. And it's like, I'm always curious because I haven't done any sort of that type of racing by any means. Like, how do you get good at that type of racing? Because it's completely different, completely separate than kind of really anything I know as a race car driver.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's crazy to see like him be good at that. And even like really good guys, like someone I would say like one of the best of our generation and the best right now is Kyle Larson. But I mean, not to say anything bad about the guy,
at those races.
He always does. Some guys just figure it out and some don't. And it's interesting to see, like he was up front too. Like he had a chance and he made, I mean, I wouldn't know necessarily what to do in those situations, but like one bad thing and you're shuffled to the back, and you've seen that a couple times in his situation. So just interesting to me.
Well, I mean, you take a guy like Rusty Wallace, who never won Daytona 500.
Mm-hmm.
Rusty Wallace won everything. He
Mm-hmm.
never won the Daytona 500, which is just crazy to think about. Mark Martin never won it.
Mm-hmm. Kyle Busch hasn't won it.
Kyle Busch has won everything.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't won it. So it's like anything else, man.
Yeah. And then you see guys like Logano and Hamlin and Austin Dillon, even maybe, and Stenhouse. Like they just, obviously they're not, it's still, a lot of luck goes into it, but it seems like they're up front and in it to win and at the end a lot more than a lot of other guys. Hey,
a guy like Bubba Wallace, who's always good in those. I mean, Bubba Wallace can flat run those that restrictor plate type of racing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is good at it.
Yeah, that was my pick to win. It's at least for my pick to see him out early, but
right.
I think we should mention, Scott, that me and you were at the Rich Vogler Scholarship Fund Daytona 500 Watts party at Raceway Park. We were set up there. We got to interview some really cool people, a lot of people we've never talked to before. So it was a lot of fun, and it was for a good cause. And I think they ended up raising like $8,000.
Yeah, it was a good cause. And, Miss Vogler, she just, even in a wheelchair, even at 91, 92 years old, she was there and she was promoting it, and her family was there. Her, Rich's sons were there. Her daughter was there. The Throckmortons put in so much work and effort to help pull that off. Raceway Park put in so much effort. Checkered Flag Tavern. I mean, so many people pitched in and made a great event. I hope more people come out next year. They had some really cool prizes, auction items, that sort of thing. And they did have a lot of giveaways, hats and decals, and anybody could have walked away with something. But it's something that I hope grows back because it really does help a lot of people and helps, it helps kids go to school, and that's a good thing. And so congratulations to them. Glad to be a part of it. And hopefully next year we can be a bigger part of it. And who knows, maybe Jagger Jones can come up next year and be the
Maybe.
master of ceremonies with all this experience he's going to have at it.
And especially going to school, right? And racing. I mean, that just fits right in with it.
Right.
The
Yeah.
and I will say, Jagger, and I think Scott mentioned this yesterday in a text, but the one thing, Cody Swanson knows who Jagger Jones is, so that's something you
Yes.
should be very proud of.
That's funny. I love that you guys are always name dropping me everywhere you go, which is cool.
Well, he didn't have to.
The name go everywhere.
Scott said Jagger, and Cody Swanson said Jagger Jones.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, it was really nice. You know, I've been around Cody a lot over the years.
Yeah, it was cool.
Don't know Cody Swanson. Yesterday's the first time we had a chance to really sit and talk to him. We were talking to him right as the race was starting, and like I said to him, I mean, that was a race. If he was in the field, he could easily win. I mean, he's so talented.
Yeah.
You know, one of this generation's greatest pavement drivers. Just unfortunately, the racing cards didn't fall his way to do those types of things. Why, I don't know, but that's how it is. And you know, speaking of, you know, he won Raceway Park, Indy Pro Car.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say that. I mean, he might not be a bad person to ask a few questions about some of the oval stuff. And I mean, him jumping in, I wasn't there that year, but I watched the videos back and stuff when I was getting ready for the Raceway Park race. And him with very limited experience, obviously has a lot of oval open wheel experience, but him just jumping in an Indy Pro car and going and winning was, I mean, shows for his talent for sure.
Well, you know, like we were talking to him yesterday, and we were like, he was talking about fast times. He's going to do a fast time sayings with Aaron, and he goes to fast times a lot. And he likes to drive the different karts because they're not all the same. He doesn't like to necessarily drive the fastest one or the slowest ones. He likes to pick some of the medium karts, and then they have different handling characteristics. And he says that way he gets to work on figuring out what it takes to make that kart work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of his whole approach to driving. I mean, from the people I've talked to, the teams that he's driven for, he is a meticulous note taker. He knows exactly what he wants out of these midgets and sprint cars and Silver Crown cars. But like we were talking yesterday, one thing he really works on is being able to change his line.
Mm-hmm.
And find, you know, if something quits working, finding the new line, things like that. And it was really interesting talking to him about that and just a few other things. But yeah, it was great talking to him. We got to talk to some of the Benhausens, Merle Benhausen, which is Gary Benhausen's brother, sons. Gary's sons were there. We talked to them. Man, we talked to Taylor Ferns. Who else did we talk to? We talked to Kenny Nichols, local Indiana legend.
Eleanor
Vogler.
Yeah.
We talked to her. We talked to the gentleman
Ed
from Classic
Dalton.
Car Characters. Yeah.
Yep.
Really, really neat guy. I'd never met him before yesterday. Really neat guy.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a great time. You have anything else, Scott?
I don't.
So thanks to some of our partners, obviously Grand King Race Shops and Top Gun Racing. Think we may have a McGilvery show next week. We'll keep everyone updated. And then Fast Times Indoor Karting. Jagger, I think you're up next time you're in Indy. You've
I'm ready to go. I've been watching some of your videos and I see my name slipping down a little bit, but I'm coming right back for the top.
He may be off the board. We get Swanson in there in the next couple of weeks. He may be completely off the board.
I know.
I'm off the board.
The track was slow that day. The track was slow that day.
The track was actually I don't know if the track was slow that day, but maybe you're in a slower kart.
Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that for sure. I don't know when I'll be in Indy.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily when I'll be there, but we'll figure it out. And like you said, maybe next year I will be in Indy once I'm graduating from college this December. So maybe next year we'll be in Indy. We'll see.
Well, I think you'll be here in May.
That is true. I will be here in May.
Well, yeah. I think we missed a sponsor, right, Scott? I mean, you're staying pretty warm these days, right?
I am staying really warm. Good folks, good guys, heating and air have kept me warm in the winter, cool in the summer. Poor Jagger, one of the times you stay at the house, the good folks and good guys we had not really utilized them yet, and we had some air conditioning problems. And poor Jagger had to suffer through that for a night, but
now I won't have
conditioning.
to.
It's part of the conditioning. It's part of his conditioning.
The sweat box was part of the conditioning. But yeah, no, it's no, they're great people to work with. Anybody in Indy, if you just need a checkup, if you need a new furnace, need a new air conditioner, please reach out to them. They're good people.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for watching and listening, and please hit like and subscribe.